Hello everyone, so this is the beginning of a new video series that's going to focus on organic and biological chemistry. So I'll be using the modern chemistry textbook, and you might want to watch these videos to help you with school, for example, if you're using the same textbook. And if you are doing it for that reason, then stick around till the end because we'll be solving the questions in the formative assessments together. Another reason that I hope you'll be watching these videos is that you're genuinely interested in the subject of biochemistry. I personally think it's one of the most exciting and amazing areas of science because it incorporates biology and chemistry, which are both fascinating, and we can see the important role chemistry plays in all living organisms, including us human beings. And it's just mind-blowing, as we'll see in this series. We're going to cover chapters 22 and 23, and we'll move through a section in a video. So we're starting with section 1 today. It's called Organic Compounds. There are 7 key terms that we'll cover and elaborate on as we move through the chapter, and as well as the main ideas, the 3 main ideas. Okay, so all organic compounds contain carbon atoms. However, not all carbon-containing compounds are classified as organic. There are a few exceptions, such as sodium carbonate, carbon monoxide, and carbon dioxide that are considered inorganic. So I'm going to stop and write some things that I consider important for you to know. For example, the names of the chemical formulas. You could read it as Na2CO3, but I think it's fancier when you say the name. Sodium carbonate, carbon monoxide, and carbon dioxide. Okay, so we can define organic compounds as covalently bonded compounds containing carbon, excluding carbonates and oxides. So covalently. Another thing is that oxides are chemical compounds with one or more oxygen atoms combined with other elements, and same for carbonates. Carbonates are, again, chemical compounds with one or more carbon atoms with other elements. So it's this is like carbon and then another element, right? And then this is N. There can be an N number of carbon atoms in order for the compound to be considered a carbonate. And same for oxides. It's an oxygen with, so an N number of oxygens and then another element. Okay, so our first main idea is that the uniqueness of carbon bonding results in many organic compounds. So here we're just gonna talk about carbon. It's indeed an amazing element. The diversity of organic compounds results from the uniqueness of carbon structure and bonding. Carbon's electronic structure, to remind you guys, is carbon has 4 valence electrons in its outermost shell, which allows it to bind to itself, to form chains and rings, and to bind covalently to other elements. It also can bind to itself and other elements in different arrangements. So, unlike pretty much any other element, carbon can bind to itself, meaning carbon makes all the difference. Okay, so our first figure, 1.1, organic compounds. So we have aspirin here, polyethylene found in plastic bags, citric acid in fruit, and amino acids in animals and humans. These are all examples of organic compounds. I have a soft spot for amino acids. Maybe we'll have another series on amino acids, but their structures also very interesting to learn, and their properties. Now I would like to stop here and just remind myself and you about the difference between a molecular formula and a chemical formula. And simply like compounds and molecules for that matter. Simply so. Compounds. Let me do this. We have compounds and we have molecules. So compounds have to consist of different elements. So there has to be an X and a Y, both of them being elements. And then a molecule doesn't have to consist of different elements. So it can be an X and an X, can be a Y and a Y, and then an X and a Y. So all compounds are molecules. But not all molecules are compounds. This is very important to remember. And then from here we can talk about molecular and chemical formulas. Chemical formulas they are more general and they can be applied to inorganic compounds. So general can be applied to inorganic compounds. They can be applied to acids and bases. They can also be applied to salts, molecules, etc. But a molecular formula they apply only to covalently bonded materials. And another very important thing to consider is that, let me pick out red, almost all organic compounds are covalently bonded. You can find these pages as a PDF under the video to refer to my notes later. So off to carbon-carbon bonding. So when carbon is bonding to itself. Carbon atoms are unique in their ability to form long chains and rings of covalently bonded atoms. This type of bonding is known as catenation, the covalent bonding of an element to itself to form chains or rings. In addition, carbon atoms in these structures can be linked by single, double, or triple covalent bonds. Examples of molecules containing carbon atom rings and chains are shown in figure 1.2. So single covalent bonds are also called sigma bonds. Here, sigma. Double bonds are also called pi bonds. And triple bonds is a triple bond is a combination of a sigma bond and a pi bond. So it's just called a triple bond. And then here in figure 1.2, we can compare the shape of a fatty acid found in cream with that of fructose found in fruit. In the fatty acid, the carbon atoms are in chains. In fructose, carbon atoms form a ring, and the structure of a compound affects its properties. Next, we have carbon bonding to other elements. Besides being able to bind to each other, carbon atoms bind readily to elements with similar electronegativities. Organic compounds consist of carbon and these other elements. Hydrocarbons are composed of only carbon and hydrogen. They are the simplest organic compounds. Other organic compounds contain hydrocarbon backbones to which other elements, primarily oxygen, nitrogen, and sulfur, and the halogens are attached. Figure 1.3 shows a molecule in which carbon atoms are bound to other elements. So here it says that backbones are made out of hydrocarbon, a hydrocarbon compound, which is just a hydrogen and a carbon. And here in figure 1.3, carbon other elements, we see an example of a light-emitting organic compound. So in firefly, luciferin, so this is the light-emitting compound that we're talking about. Carbon atoms bind to hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and sulfur. Luciferin is responsible for the light emitted from the tail of a firefly. So I just want to give a little more detail on this. How fireflies get their light. I know it's very interesting to me. Luciferin is the light emitting compound that we're talking about here, and the way it gives light to a firefly is because it oxidizes. So luciferin oxidizes in the presence of an enzyme. And this enzyme is called luciferase. Arrangement of atoms. The bonding capabilities of carbon also allow for different arrangements of atoms. This means that some compounds may contain the same atoms but have different properties. So same atoms but different properties, because the atoms are arranged differently. For example, the molecular formula C2H6O represents both ethanol and dimethyl ether. Compounds that have the same molecular formula but different structures are called isomers. And they exist because of what? Carbon's unique properties and the fact that it has 4 valence electrons in its outermost shell. Our next main idea is that structural formulas show the numbers, types, and arrangement of the atoms in a molecule. So there are a couple ways that a compound can be represented. One of them is a structural formula. There's also chemical formula, and a condensed structural formula. But there is an advantage to a structural formula because, as the name implies, we can see the structure. Organic chemists use structural formulas to represent organic compounds. This is necessary in order to show the difference between isomers of a compound. A structural formula indicates the number and types of atoms present in a molecule and also shows the bonding arrangement of the atoms. An example of a structural formula for an isomer of C4H10 is the following. So here we see an example of a structural formula. And structural formulas are sometimes condensed, so they are easier to read. In one type, the hydrogen single covalent bonds are not shown. The atoms are understood to bind to the atom they are written beside. So here, we can see it on the next page. The following structural and condensed structural formulas represent the same molecule. It is the same molecule. So this structure is the same as we saw on the last page. And these two structures are the same. If we omit these bonds, we end up with a methyl group here. So this is this part, and then this is this part, and so forth. So remember that the structural formula does not accurately show the 3-dimensional shape of the molecule. This is also very important to remember. This is just for us to visualize, like somewhat visualize how the compound looks like, its structure. And three-dimensional shape is depicted with drawings or models as shown for ethanol in figure 1.4. Now, I'd like to acquaint you with these compounds. This one's called isobutane. Isobutane. It's also sometimes referred to as ibutane. It has four common names. 2-methylpropane and simply methylpropane. So you can call it 2-methylpropane or methylpropane. And then its isomer is butane, as we will see here. It has the same molecular formula but a different structure. Right, figure 1.4. So structural and condensed formulas. The structure of ethanol can be represented in different ways. Ball and stick, so this one, ball and stick, and space-filling models represent the three-dimensional shape of the molecule. I think this is our second, or is it the last main idea? I'm not sure. It's that isomers can be structural or geometric. So you have learned that isomers are compounds that have the same molecular formula but different structural formulas. Isomers can be further classified by structure and geometry. First, we're going to talk about structural isomers. Structural isomers are also called constitutional isomers, and they are isomers in which the atoms are bonded together in different orders. For example, the atoms of the molecular formula C4H10 can be arranged in two different ways. So here we have the aforementioned butane and 2-methylpropane. Notice that the formula for butane shows a continuous chain of 4 carbon atoms, but the formula of 2-methylpropane shows a continuous chain of 3 carbon atoms, with the 4th carbon atom attached to the 2nd carbon atom of the chain. Structural isomers can have different properties. This is also very important to note. For example, butane and 2-methylpropane have different melting points, boiling points, and densities as shown in figure 1.5. So here we can see the differences in the two isomers' melting points, boiling points, and densities. So both of them, if we were to write a molecular formula for either of these compounds, it would be C4H10. And from this chemical formula, which is a way to express a compound, we could not tell which isomer we're talking about. But when we have a structural formula and enough knowledge to identify the compound, we can easily tell exactly which one we're talking about. So that is exactly why organic chemists are using structural formulas and not chemical formulas on a regular basis, because isomers exist. We're going to come back to this question after we're done, because it talks about geometric isomers that we are about to dive into. So geometric isomers are isomers in which the order of atom bonding is the same, but the arrangement of atoms in space is different. So the order of atom bonding, this means that the picture, kind of like the structure as in where the bonds form and where the bonds lie is the same, but the placement of the atoms is different. So we'll consider the molecule 1,2-dichloroethene, which contains a double bond. The double bond prevents free rotation and holds groups on either side of the molecule. This means there can be two different 1,2-dichloroethene geometric isomers as shown below. Here we have a cis-geometric isomer and a trans-geometric isomer. So as you see, like the picture the way the structure of the compound, especially from afar, it would look the same to you, but the placement of the atoms is different. So there's a chlorine atom here, but a hydrogen atom here, and then a hydrogen. So these two were swapped. You see? This is, these two are geometric isomers of each other. The geometric isomer with the two chlorine atoms on the same side of the molecule is called cis, and the isomer with the chlorine atom on opposite sides of the molecule is called trans. This particular form has been in the news a great deal in recent years due to research showing the harmfulness of trans fats in the human diet. Figure 1.6 is an example of geometric isomers that occur in nature. So let's go and see what the application is. Males of the Iowa strain of the European corn borer respond most strongly to mixtures of the female sex attractant pheromone that are 96% cis isomer. Males of the New York strain respond most strongly to mixtures containing 97 trans isomer. This is very interesting because we see how the geographical location affects the way humans, the way they respond to different chemicals. And that is likely because of their genes and their predisposition to certain chemicals. So once again, we see that these two compounds, they kind of look the same from afar, but if we were to look into them, we see that these two, this and this, have been swapped, and we got an isomer, this thing. And they are completely different, even though they might not look that different at first. So the difference in properties between two geometric isomers can be very small or very large depending on the type of bonding in them. Sometimes the arrangement of the atoms in the transformation enables the molecules to pack together more easily and so increases the melting point of the isomer. Similarly, if the arrangement increases the intramolecular forces between two molecules as a consequence of the polarity of the bonds, the boiling point of that isomer will be higher because the molecules are held together more strongly. Our first question asks, which of the following represent the same molecule? So again, let's look at A and B first. In A, we have, so this first bit would be a CH3, and then a CH2, another CH2, and a third CH2, and this is another CH3. And it kind of looks similar to B, but there's a CH2 is called a methylene group. So if there was another methylene group in this structure, they would be the same, but they're not. Then looking at C, it doesn't look like anything that we see above, so we're gonna have to cross these out immediately. And then D, it looks exactly like A, but so this is a structural formula, and this is a chemical formula of the same compound, because we do indeed have 5 carbon atoms, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 12 hydrogen atoms if you count them all. Yep, so once again, A and D are the answer. Let's do this. A and D are the answer because they have the same molecular formula. Question 2. What are 3 characteristics of carbon that contribute to the diversity of organic compounds? Okay, so first is carbon's ability to bond with itself. Second is that it binds readily to atoms with similar electronegativities. And third, it's that there's a different arrangement of atoms, so the existence of isomers because of carbon's nature. Third question asks us to define the term isomer and distinguish between structural and geometric isomers. Okay, so an isomer is two or more compounds that have the same molecular formulas. Question 3 asks us to define the term isomer and distinguish between structural and geometric isomers. So once again, an isomer is a compound that has the same molecular formula as another compound, but has a different structure than another compound with the same molecular formula. And there's a structural and a geometric isomer, the former having the same shape. That's geometric. Structural has a different shape. So the shape overall is different. Like when you look at the structure, you can tell that two or more compounds with the same molecular formula have different shapes. They look different to your eye. And a geometric isomer might look the same at first, so its shape is the same, but the arrangement, like the placement of elements in space, is different. The fourth question asks which of the following types of molecular representations can be used to show differences between isomers. Explain why each can or cannot. So in order to see the differences between isomers, we need to see their structure. So that's why we can cross away molecular formula right away, because a molecular formula, like in the form of this, it doesn't tell us anything about the structure. So a structural formula would show the difference between isomers, as we saw in the examples above, and a three-dimensional drawing or a model would also show us a difference between two isomers because it would show us the differences in structure. Lastly, the fifth question asks, can molecules that have molecular formulas C4H10 and C4H10O be isomers of one another? Why or why not? So think about it for a second. You can stop the video, come up with an answer, and then unpause it. So the answer is no, because isomers must have the same molecular formula, and C4H10 and C4H10O obviously don't. So this is it for section 22.1. You learned everything you needed to know about the basics of organic compounds, and see you in 22.2 as we'll talk about hydrocarbons.